In a previous video, I mentioned the Eliza Fernley, one of Southport's early lifeboats. I stated it was Southport's first lifeboat, but that's not the case. So I'm going to revisit the story as the Eliza Fernley has its own place in not only local, but national history. In the early 18th century, the area around Southport was a poor community that relied on fishing as a primary source of income. The coastline between Liverpool and Preston was a notorious graveyard for shipping. The Mussel, the Pegu, the Ionic Star, the Star of Hope. Over the years, over a dozen wrecks have foundered here, caught out by the shallow water and hidden sandbanks. In those early days, it was the local fishermen who would risk their boats and income, even their lives, to go to the rescue, dragging their craft across the mud and the salt flats. With the growth of Liverpool as a major port, and to a lesser extent the port at Preston, the need for a lifeboat service was established. Indeed, the first station in Britain was built at Formby in 1776. The remains of these early buildings are still visible today. Southport gained its own lifeboat around 10 years later, however the boat was considered inadequate. It would be another 60 years before a regular station was established in the town, when the boat Rescue was sighted by the shoreline at the end of Coronation Walk, coxed for 8 years by Richard Rimmer, then William Rockcliffe. Much decorated in his time, when Rockcliffe retired in 1873, aged 69, he'd assisted in saving at least 367 people, earning himself the RNLI Silver Medal along the way. The Rescue served from 1840 to 1861, saving some 20 vessels and 175 lives. Going back a little, in 1824, Manxman Sir William Hillary organised the formation of the National Institution for the Preservation of Life from Shipwreck, which would later become the Royal National Lifeboat Institution, the RNLI, in 1854. In 1860, Bolton businessman and former mayor John Knowles granted a gift to the RNLI for a new Bolton station to be built somewhere along the Lancashire coast. Southport was chosen, and the Jessie Knowles, named after his daughter, came into service the following year. Coxed by Rockcliffe, she attended some 21 wrecks and saved around 79 lives. This brings us to the Eliza Fernley. The Jessie Knowles had been sent away for repairs and never returned. Local businessman John Fernley stepped in. Originally from Stockport, Fernley had moved to Southport in 1856, contributing to several projects in his adopted home, including the meteorological station and this, the old schoolhouse. He was a staunch Methodist who believed in the power of salvation, which almost certainly drew him to the lifeboat service. Indeed, he was a committee member of the Southport RNLI branch, and being a man of wealth, it's not hard to see why he made his tremendous gesture of donating a new boat to the town. Fernley passed away in 1873, but the craft, named after his wife, was dedicated in January 1874. Coxswain was Charles Hodge, and over the next 13 years, the boat and her crew saved some 52 lives until disaster struck. December 1886. The German ship Mexico, a 400-ton iron bark, left Liverpool bound for Guayaquil, Ecuador. On the night of the 9th, she was caught in a fierce storm, and the ship was pushed onto a sandbank at Ainsdale off the Southport coast. Distress flares were sent up, and 3 lifeboats were launched. First in the water was the Eliza Fernley and its crew of 16, followed around 20 minutes later by the St.Annes boat, the Laura Janet, with 13 crew and sails set. Later, the Lytham boat, the Charles Biggs, on its maiden voyage, joined the rescue. Rowing through heavy seas, the Eliza Fernley had gotten to within 20 yards of the stricken Mexico, close enough that a crewman prepared himself to throw the wreck a line, when an immense wave overwhelmed the open boat, capsizing it. The Laura Janet never made it to the Mexico. She was found the next day, washed ashore at Birkdale. All 13 hands were lost. The Charles Biggs, however, did make it to the Mexico. Despite shattering several oars and being filled numerous times with water, the new boat reached the ship and rescued all 12 crew who had lashed themselves to the ship's rigging. Remarkably, 2 crew members survived the Eliza Fernley sinking. Henry Robinson and John Jackson clung to the upturned boat. Having tried unsuccessfully to assist their colleagues trapped under the hull, the 2 men swam back to shore to raise the alarm. The boat was found around 2 hours later, washed up on the sands at Birkdale, opposite the Palace Hotel. Sadly, the remaining 14 hands were lost. Their bodies were laid out at the hotel's coach house, now the Fisherman's Rest public house. 14 brass mermaids hold the bar's handrail, a lasting memorial to the pub's part in the disaster. Public appeals raised money for the widows and children of the crews, with donations coming from Queen Victoria and the German Emperor Kaiser Wilhelm, the Mexico being a Hamburg-registered ship. Several memorials were later erected. At St.Annes, a lifeboatman stands on the promenade looking out to sea, while a sandstone monument at St. Cuthbert's Church in Lytham carries a carving of a lifeboat. Plaques bear the names of the crew. Southport's memorial is here at Duke Street Cemetery. A Grade II listed structure, the sandstone and granite memorial is in the form of a tomb chest with carved relief panels depicting a lifeboat and inscriptions to the Southport crew. The carving on top shows a broken mast protruding from the waves. Designed by Ernest Walter Johnson, the sculptor was Thomas Robinson. A second memorial, a granite obelisk, is located on the promenade. Also designed by Thomas Robinson and Grade II listed, its location is not far from the site of the old boathouse. Before the area was reclaimed and developed, the promenade was much closer to the sea. Now it's around a third of a mile to the shoreline. The Eliza Fernley was recovered but condemned. Her replacement was the Mary Anna, which was rarely used, followed by the Edith and Annie, purchased by two Southport ladies, which served for around 14 years and was stationed at the end of the pier. The Mexico was refloated and became a tourist attraction for a while, ironically off the Lytham and St.Annes coast, before sinking in Scottish waters in 1890. With the loss of 27 men, this remains the worst disaster in the history of the lifeboat service. The inquiry into the incident led in 1888 to an overhaul of the entire fleet, including replacing inadequate boats with superior craft, intense trials of self-righting boats, and to reviews and improvements into the service in general. In Southport, the town's corporation built a new boathouse nearer to the shoreline, but falling traffic meant the RNLI discontinued the service in 1905, with the last active boat, the John Harling, leaving the town in 1925. Fast forward another 60 years, and following a series of incidents, the local community successfully raised the funds to restart a lifeboat service in the town. Since 1988, the Southport Offshore Rescue Trust has provided their life-saving service up to 25 miles offshore, with two boats, a Class D inshore and an Arctic 24 primary vessel on a 10-minute standby. The trust also covers the beach area and the marine lake and has quad bikes for use around the coastline. Currently housed in the Spartan 1888 boathouse, the crew have had to contend with a lack of even basic essentials such as heating and washing provision. But funds have been secured and they're in the middle of building a new station just over the way, just over the top of those containers. Zoom in a bit. Here's a view from the sea wall looking back towards the old station. You can just see the roof in the distance. And if I swing the camera around, we see the new station. Okay, so at the minute it's a building site, but this is how the new 700 square metre base and training centre will look when complete, with much improved facilities including kitchen, showers and toilets for the crew, workshop and storage space, a drying area for kit and, most crucial of all, better shoreline access. Independent of the RNLI, the Trust relies on donations and fundraising to keep operating. I'll post their link at the end of this video. So there you have it, a potted history of the Eliza Fernley and her impact on lifeboating in the UK. Apologies for some of the shaky camera work, but it was really windy when I shot the video. Really windy. I could have returned on a sunnier, calmer day of course, but I felt I owed it to the lifeboat service to partake just a little of the conditions they often have to launch in. Anyway, thank you for watching, and here's that link.